We've got 7 minutes, but I did, like I mentioned, want to talk a little bit about your brand, because I know oftentimes when you move into this phase of your career journey where you're looking for the next step, it's sometimes useful and maybe a little bit ambiguous to figure out who you are in this process, and you don't want to lose yourself, right? Because you're talking to all of these different companies, you're in all these processes. I think it's really important for us to have a clear sense of self as we move through this, both, from our brand perspective and then some of the logistical things that kind of make up our brand. So, quick overview. I think it doesn't need to be super existential, philosophical when it comes to building your brand. I think it just starts with some introspection and reflection on the strengths and the core skill sets that you are developing to achieve your goals. And I think making a list is great. Next slide, I have some questions that you could ask yourself that, again, I'll hopefully send out as a reference so you can start to use that as a basis for reflection. I think also defining your audience is really key when you're starting to think about your brand. You're going to be talking to a lot of different people, maybe recruiters, maybe program managers, maybe, interviewers, hiring managers. So who do you want to be in these different spaces, and what do you want to highlight is really important. Then I think one thing that I really like to suggest is always finding 2 to 3 examples that showcase your skill sets and building a narrative around them. So instead of, when someone asks you, when did you have a conflict and you resolved it? You have these examples in your back pocket at all times to pull from that showcase multiple different traits, whether it's a project or a moment in your program or some accomplishment that you can kind of just always have at the back of your mind instead of scrambling to find something in the moment. Also, super important, I think, to work on your self-promo pitch. We'll talk about that in a bit. Embracing networking and events. You're already here, which is a great sign. So I think continuing to be in the spaces where you feel comfortable and excited to learn from others, get in front of people that you admire or that you want to hear from is super, super key. And then be consistent and continue to, as you develop that brand, continue to share it and develop that narrative in all of these spaces. So this is just a quick snapshot, not going to read them all, but I think it's always nice to use a couple, questions or like general thought areas to start writing down your brand proposition. So there's some questions there in terms of what motivates you, what characteristics have you been complimented on, what things work and don't work for you, and then reflecting on your skill sets. So what are unique qualities you have, values that you have, how do you like to make an impact, and then important moments in your professional journey, even personal journey as well, that you're really proud of, or where you wanted to highlight some part of yourself in terms of your brand. Really quickly wanted to highlight LinkedIn. I think LinkedIn is a really great tool because honestly, a lot of times companies and recruiters are looking at LinkedIn to understand more about who you are, even if that's not the way they find you. We love to just double check on your background, your profile, who you are, what your brand represents on LinkedIn. So I think it's really important to have a crisp profile. Use a photo if you're comfortable. Complete the main profile sections that you'll see when you're in your profile builder. Focus on key skills as well. So if you have people that can endorse you for those skills, great. If not, at least please delineate what those skills are. And then also one thing that I think is kind of key is mapping your experience directly to what's on your resume, because a lot of times we see things on LinkedIn that are very different from someone's resume, and then there's confusion. So trying to kind of make sure those 2 resources are aligned. Quantifying your accomplishments, of course, in terms of just being able to really call out in a punchy way the 1 or 2 great things you did at each job or in each experience. And then post and comment for reach if you are comfortable, if that's something that you want to do to stay active on the network. A lot of times I hear of people finding roles or great connections through just LinkedIn engagement. So some general thoughts there on LinkedIn. Resume stuff, again, won't go through it in too much detail, but I think it's really important to focus on function over form. As someone who's a former recruiter, I was a recruiter for the last almost 10 years. I really think the content of your resume is much more powerful than how it looks. So I wouldn't worry too much about graphics or color or fancy things. Just get the right information in there. And I think the foundation of a framework, of a resume is a lot of times I see, you know, I did X, I did Y, I did Z, but I think what is great to always think about in terms of your accomplishments is I did this thing which resulted in Y outcome or had Y impact. That second piece is really, really key, which is kind of the differentiator when we're looking at resumes, right? What did you actually achieve based on the thing that you did, not just what you did. Also important to put your known skills and technologies in at the bottom of your resume. I don't think there's a need for a summary. A lot of times I'll see like a little like 3-sentence bio. Remove it. We will get it when you put that information in the rest of your resume. Coursework and things like what you've learned in these bootcamp programs, super important to highlight as well. And then also leadership and volunteer experience that does not go unnoticed. It's really great to see who you are as a person, because that often does translate to how you will perform on the job and what level of you know, potential and excitement you have for the work at hand. Okay.